All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are talking with Adam, better known under his moniker of Burial Grid. How you doing, Adam?
I am great. I really am.
So you got a new album out, so we're going
Mhm.
to start off talking about that. I've been following Where a Foxma for quite a while now. How did
Mhm.
you end up getting to work with Where a Foxma?
I've been going it alone for, well, I mean, since the beginning of Bayro Grid, but even like before that, I typically don't work with labels. I've only worked with labels like two or three times before. And it's always been like a fine experience. Nothing against that, but I think I just get impatient and I'm like a control freak. It's also why, I work by myself. So historically, I've been like, I'm not gonna collaborate with anyone on this. I'm just gonna kind of put out myself. But I kind of started feeling like both, like I was hitting a wall in terms of audience reach, but also there are just so many amazing labels right now. And I kind of narrowed it down to three labels. I want to work with either Spun Out of Control, Waxing Crescent, or Wear a Foxma. All three have this like glowing reputation of both treating their roster and their fans really well. I think the main thing that those labels have in common is that every single release that they put out, and I usually don't miss a release. I'm not so good about buying them at this point, but I do listen to everything that comes out and love about 99.9%. And I always feel like I'm hearing something new that I've like never heard before. Like for me, when I'm listening to music, one of the most precious and important qualities that it can have is I like being surprised. I like listening to a piece of music that kind of takes me on a journey, like a journey, and like it starts in one place and ends in a totally different plane. I feel like every single one of the releases on those three labels is like that. I reached out to all three of them, I think on the same day, back in like, and never heard from Spun Out of Control. Wax and Crescent, they were really interested, but they want to uh, feature sleeve artwork by their in-house designer, and I already had a design, and I'm like really anal about how I present music visually. So that didn't really work out, but maybe I'll work with them in the future because they're really great. And then Frazier from Where Foxma, I think he might have been the first one to get back to me. He was super sweet and wanted to make it happen, and that was really really exciting because they have like Salvatore Mercatante and they have APTA and they have Oceanographer, and they have his own music, which is great. And Scanner, who's like a legend. Like I grew up listening to Scanner in the '90s. They're just like that roster is flawless. Like the new Elizabeth Crompton album is like beautiful. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel lucky. I feel lucky to be in really good hands, and I feel lucky to be in like amazing company.
I mean, like I said, I follow We're a Foxma and I definitely follow Waxing Crescent.
Hmm.
I love most of their releases, but I know what you mean about the artwork at all. They're real big on having their theme. I love their theme. Like whoever, I don't know who's doing their drawings, like their album artwork, but it is amazing.
They have a new one. 'Cause I don't know what happened. Something happened with their old artist. So I think they have a new artist. And a lot of labels do that. They like it's for, branding purposes. They like a consistent, like they want the presentation to be as consistent as possible, which I totally respect and understand.
Right.
There's so many great labels who do that, but I feel like the visual component is it's almost as important. So if you're not vibing with it, or if you have like something different, that's part of why I don't work with labels usually.
So a big thing about you working with labels is you like to have more like full creative control over what you're putting out. And with some of the labels, they have their own requirements.
Yeah, or maybe not full, but like because Stephen Osborne ended up doing all of the layout and came up with the graphic design work for the tape, and he did an amazing job. The starting point was artwork that I commissioned from this New York artist named Sarah Best. It was this digital collage work. There's some labels I'm a really big fan of who do this kind of thing, and I I can't picture, I just can't picture doing that. And so I'm probably the one losing out. Like if a label has like a futuristic aesthetic, like my music, it's not in my mind, it's not futuristic sounding, and it just doesn't make any sense at all. Otherwise, like musically, like they, it might be a label that I would love to work with. So yeah, I think I just can't surmount that, the idea of, yeah, it's the control freak in me, I guess. But I mean, I do like collaborating as well.
I kind of know what you mean on artwork. For a lot of people, like their artwork, like you said, the visual component of what you're putting out is almost as important as the music itself. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
but I mean, talking about like the actual music itself. So I was comparing this album to some of your previous releases, right? So this one, I'm not going to say it's happy by any means, but it definitely doesn't seem to have the same kind of like quality as your previous releases. Like Shores of Quiddity was like a really slow burn, atmospheric kind of thing. We've Come for Your Flesh was it was almost like a doom metal album that was more electronic. But this one sounds, like I said, I don't want to call it happy or upbeat, but it feels more. I mean, how would you describe it?
All I can do is like hope that it like a certain feeling is conveyed, but everyone's gonna get something different out of it. I hope it's comforting in a way, um, with maybe a somewhat unintentional undercurrent of like melancholy. Each time I make an album, because I'm like album focused, which is like really stupid to do in 2022. Everyone's kind of focused on singles, but my brain just doesn't work. I've tried doing that; it doesn't work at all. I can't do like isolated songs. Like I think I almost like, and it's probably obnoxious sounding, but I approach it more the way like a film director would approach making a film. You take on like this entire project, and it's like this vision, and you might not even know what the vision is when you start off, and it kind of starts revealing itself as you go. For Shores of Quiddity, that was completely improvised. Well, okay, so I had one rule in place before I started. So each track could only have 3 tracks. So they're only like each song only has 3 tracks of music on it. I want it to be like super, super, super minimal. And each song is, or each piece is totally improvised. And when I made that, it was January of last year, of 2021. And I was going through hardcore anxiety, like health anxiety. I was having grief, sort of like a trauma reaction that was kind of manifesting physically, and I didn't know what was going on. And so I was getting really into meditation, like really deep into that, and really into psychedelics. And it turns out that music that was just what my, it was almost like physiologically, that's what I needed. I needed something that I could kind of like meditate to. So that music ends up sounding like meditation music. We've Come for Your Flesh. That was an ode to like a lot of doom and death metal and like almost like blackened industrial music that I grew up on in the 90s. Stuff that really kind of romanticized things that were very morbid and like, like just like death, almost from like an aesthetic point of view, like death is kind of cool. I mean, it was music made by people like in their early 20s who hadn't experienced death yet for the most part. And I wanted to like take those aesthetics and apply it to actually experiencing, I guess, secondhand death, in this case, the death of my dad, without that kind of like romantic, the romantic quality, where it's, but I want it to be kind of like death positive as well. But anyway, so right. So kind of it's like an homage to a lot of that stuff. And then this album, I had started making it, so it was January of last year or February. I'm trying to remember when Putin invaded the Ukraine. I can't remember if it was February or the end of January.
I don't know, but it feels like it was years ago, right?
Right. So like historically, I've been like a news junkie, but I have no idea to what end because I'm not like politically active in any way at this point, for the most part, unfortunately.
I feel that. Yeah.
And but I used to be, and now I feel like it. I think it was a symptom of a highly disordered, anxious brain that had control issues because a really good friend of mine, I was talking to, he was like kind of in disbelief that I don't read more political news anymore. And I was asking him like what he gets out of it without any judgment. And his answer kind of confirmed my own suspicions about why I was addicted to it. And I think if you have a lot of anxiety about like lack of control in a chaotic world, reading or watching the news, there's this fiction that you're able to like see all of these arrows and darts like flying about. In reading about all of them, you can maybe see one that's heading in your direction and jump out of the way before it impales you. And that's not how reality works. And that's not how chaos works, of course.
That's the best way I've ever heard it described, honestly. I've also had the problem. It's just like, oh, I'm just reading all this constant like political news about like, oh, what did this dumbass say? What did this dumbass say? And it's just like, oh, how much are they gonna fuck me over? And it's just like,
Yeah.
I can't jump out of the way of like the big dick that they're gonna throw me, you know? Like it's gonna slap me in the face one way or another. So
No, I was a
I feel you.
big dick doom scroller. Like, I mean, it was really, really bad. So yeah, January or February of last year. Yeah, I mean, and I know that the Russian Ukrainian conflict is more complicated than a lot of people talk about. But in general, as someone who feels like more of a pacifist, every shade
Yes.
of it is just vile. And then, you add to that like sort of long form bloodletting in, Yemen and Democratic Republic of Congo and Myanmar and like all of that, and also the backdrop of climate change and being in, a mass extinction event and just all of that. And I was feeling like particularly hopeless about the future and really just disturbed every day.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even planning on making an album. So I just kind of sat down one day and I was thinking about the time in my life when I felt most safe. And it was when I was in this well, I should say that that time period, which was like 2009 to maybe the beginning of 2011, I also happened to be in this band called Sylphid. And it was my ex-wife Cora and I and our friend Eon. And we made these sort of glitchy, loop-based, completely improvised like lullabies using any instruments we could get our hands on. And every single time we sat down to play, it was improvised and we would record it. And it was the closest experience that I've had to anything spiritual in my life. It was like the band that got away, but like addiction issues happened, and also Cora and I got divorced in 2011.
So how long did that project last?
It started in February of 2009 and went until like summer of 2011. And it was great. I mean, I've been in some like really fun bands. I've been in some really frustrating bands, but that band was fantastic. It just fell apart.
So are there any like surviving recordings of that band
Oh,
or
I got there's so many. I mean, we probably had 200 hours of material recorded, but online there's some stuff on Bandcamp. I think and maybe SoundCloud. I think there's some surviving stuff. We had one thing put out by a label called Grinding Tapes. I just loved that band so much. It was like a second adolescence.
just as long as you know, I'm going to have to try and track this down now.
You should. I want everyone to hear. And the thing, and that's with no ego attached, because when we were making that music, people talk about improvised art as being like very impressionistic. It's not really how it was. It was just it was like the David Lynch transcendental meditation concept of, you're like fishing, you're just pulling fish out of the depths of your subconscious. And that's kind of how it was. So it's not like we would go back and listen to it and we had no idea who played what. There wasn't any ego. It was just like, wow, this is genuinely beautiful. And like none of us had any idea where any of it came from. Sometimes it was shit. So I was kind of thinking back instinctively to this time that felt very safe and very stable. And I kind of wanted to almost make like an homage to that. So there are a lot of similarities, I think, between Sylphid and Music for Tomorrow, because I wanted to make this at least while I was making it, and hopefully, I'm one of those people. I listen to my own music. Like it bums me out when people don't listen to their. I understand it because I think after a certain point, if I like release an album, maybe like a month after I put it out and then for like the next 2 years, I don't want to go near it because it's just all I can hear are mistakes, and it's just like I'm just sick of it. But after that, it's just fun to kind of reassess what you did and to revisit. Like I feel like making any kind of art, whether it's a movie or a painting or an album or a song, like it's like getting a tattoo. It's scarification. It's where you were at one certain point, and it's interesting revisiting it. And I think ideally, like at least when I make music, I like making something that it's so tailored to like my own needs that I should be able to go back and listen to it. And it should tick certain boxes that I can't get in other places. That being said, other people's music will tick boxes I can never even come close to approaching. So I think the idea was while I was making it, and then maybe over the next few months, if I were to go back and listen to it, it would take me into this world that felt more nurturing and positive and kind of ecstatic. So I think that, yeah, maybe not happy, but more positive, less blood and guts. It was like dizzyingly ecstatic, disconcertingly upbeat at points.
Like a manic episode even.
Yeah,
Like, oh
yeah,
wow, why is he so happy all of a sudden? This is
yeah.
kind of weird.
That's actually a really good way of putting it. I never even thought of it that way. That's perfect.
So while we're talking about like what influenced the work on this album, so I went back and I listened to another EP that you put out under the moniker God's Teeth. So I listened to the new album and then I listened to God's Teeth, and I was like, I hear a few similarities here. Do you think doing that EP like had any influence on like what you're doing now?
God, that like EP or project just kind of like broke my heart. What was behind it, and then not knowing how to release it, not knowing what to do with it, and knowing that like it probably will never really be heard by anyone. So okay, so I'll tell you a quick story about how that even came to be. All of the vocals on that EP that you hear were recorded in 2016. A really good friend of mine who we mutually kind of parted ways. I guess the vocals were recorded in 2017 because in 2016 they sent me 3 instrumental demos. Kind of sounded a little bit like Calm Trues, and I was like, oh, this is great. So I recorded vocals to those 3 songs, and then I recorded a cappella vocal tracks for 2 other songs, and I sent them to this friend, and they never got around to like building music up around those. This was my longest running friendship, and it wasn't even that we were super close. There sometimes we wouldn't talk for months, but it was a long. We've been friends since like 1998. So as a way of reconciling that and reconciling them kind of not talking to me, I decided that I would take the vocal tracks from all of those songs. I would pitch the instrumental demos that I recorded the tracks onto, just get rid of them completely, rewrite those songs entirely, and then for the 2 a cappella tracks, I would just write my own music and around those. And that was the result. I did that last fall, and it was mostly just a way of like distracting myself and as a way of kind of like coping with that loss and kind of moving past it, and it kind of worked more or less. The end result was I had this like little EP that I had no idea what to do with it. I just kind of impulsively put it out on Bandcamp. It's nothing that most Bear Rigger fans would have like any interest in. It's like kind of, I mean, you've heard it.
It reminds me a lot of like early 9 Inch Nails combined with like early 2010s to 2020 indie rock. Like it sounds like a weird mixture of those two to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it it was a weird way to work because I was just writing music around vocal parts, which I'd never really done before. So I wasn't even like thinking about what the music would sound like. I wasn't like going in like a specific direction or anything. Didn't do a good job of promoting it. I probably should have looked for a label. I didn't do that, and I don't think anyone really listened to it for the most part. The people who did, that's amazing. Thank you, because you're apparently one of the few. I think it might sound a little bit like this old project, which I guess I could plug this from 2011 until 2017. I had this project. It was just like a solo thing. I used to play live with it called Tundra Toddler.
So when I look at your Spotify playlist, your synth noir, like I look at who made it, and it said Tundra Toddler.
Oh
So
yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
yeah, I was wondering about that. I was like, what? No, I thought that was Burial Grid. Who the fuck is Tundra Toddler?
Yeah, I never changed that. I think it automatically defaulted to that because that was the email address that I like logged in with or something, and I just left it. That project was kind of like what you're describing. It's like pop, like electronic, maybe industrial stuff, and kind of glitchy, like IDM type. I don't know what the fuck it was. It was weird, but it didn't. A lot of it really didn't work at all. And the last album is like an abomination, and like no one should waste their time listening to it. I've actually considered going onto Bandcamp and just removing that one, but that it was like the result of. So I DJ'd for like 10 years. I was like really into like I had like DJing dance nights, and I was like, I'm gonna make a dance album, like a weird kind of like noisy, glitchy dance, and it was fucking puke. It was awful. It sounds like a midlife crisis album. It's kind of similar to that stuff. God's Teeth. I mean, I did all the music for the God's Teeth EP in it was like August through October of last year, and then 2 months later, I started music for No Tomorrow. So it could just be because they were made in close, chronological proximity. But
So I follow you on Instagram, Twitter, all of that. So I've noticed you've been showing off a lot of the new gear that you've gotten. Like you have a whole new studio set up and everything. So was any of that new gear featured on Music for No Tomorrow, or is that all just stuff that you've gotten rid of now?
are you talking about like because there's like the Polybrute, the Chroma Polaris, the Iridium from Waldorf. Those I just got over like the last 2 weeks because it's just time for new blood. Last year as well, I got an Op 6, a Monopoly, and a Medusa last year. The Medusa and the Monopoly are on Music for No Tomorrow like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. But I got those like pretty much while the album was being recorded. Oh, actually, one of the reasons why I started making Music for No Tomorrow, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, was I was planning on selling my Yamaha Reface DX, my Dave Smith Instruments Prophet 08, the Arturia Micro Freak, and the Korg Mini Log. But I love all four of them. So I was just like, fuck, I mean, they need like one last hurrah. So maybe I'll just start making some music just with these 4 synths. And that was the initial impetus, like the very, very first thing that made me kind of like crack open Ableton Live and like start recording. So like 75% of at least the synths that you hear on those albums or on that album are those 4 synths. The other 25% is like everything else that I have. But there's like a lot of what you're hearing is like acoustic instruments, found sounds. It's just like a Technicolor vomit splattered toilet bowl of like all different kinds of stuff. It's like super.
I think the fancy way of saying that is it's a collage.
Yeah.
But I like the way you said it too.
It's maximalism,
What's the artistic movement called maximalism? Well, it's just the opposite of minimalism.
The new stuff, that's all going to be on this new chunk of music that I'm going to be working on probably very slowly over the next 2 years.
So while we're talking about that, I did want to ask, like, what's next for Burial Grid? So are you already working on your new release, or are you actually going to try and like space this one out, take a little pause? Or
well, actually 2 things. Well, 3. I have 3. It's a 3-part answer. Maybe a 3.5. It's like the third part has like an A and a B. When I recorded the material for Shores of Quiddity, it was actually enough for 2 different albums. So, and I want to release both of those on vinyl. So I'm kind of looking for a label for the second half of that material, which is going to be called Waves of Qualia. And if I don't find a label like within the next month, I'll probably just self-release it again on vinyl, probably like later next year. Like also my friend Nick Verdi, who's a filmmaker, who's made a few really, really good movies. He made this movie Cockazoid. That's fantastic. If you like movies like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer and Maniac and
Cockazoid, COCK Azoid.
which when I
Oh.
first heard when I first heard the title, I was like, "You gotta be fucking kidding me! This is like the dumbest." Like, I mean, it catches your attention, but it's really stupid. And then I happened to look up the definition of Cockazoid, and it actually makes perfect sense. I didn't
Okay,
realize
so it's not a
Cockazoid-
porno, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not like penile in any way or phallic.
Okay.
Cockazoid is a derogatory term for like white person, like cracker or honky, and
Really?
it's fitting for the movie. It's great. It's actually there's a scene in it that's one of the most upsetting, disturbing things I've ever seen, and I ended up acting in this other movie that he made called Sweet Relief this past summer. I'm not sure when that's coming out. Probably obviously next year. But he's going to be shooting another short film. I think it's only going to be a short film this winter. And I'm probably going to be doing the score for that.
So with that one, are you just going to let it just be the score, or are you going to put the score out on Bandcamp or release it on a cassette or anything like that? Or
I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't even know what he's looking for musically. Like we need to talk more about it. I might do the same type of thing with those 4 synths. I might just like shoehorn them into the score and be like, all right, I'm going to base everything around these 4 bits of kit. Once you brought this up, I was deliberating as to whether or not I should even mention this. I'm trying my hand at writing
a novel or a comic book?
I don't know. It probably won't be a novel because there's no way I'm going to be able to find someone to publish a novel. I would be a first time writer. I don't even know if I'm going to be any good at it. Like I'm in the brainstorming stages, but I was going to take a stab at writing maybe a novella, something of that length, then creating a score for that. Sort of like what I did for Negative Space, because Negative Space is obviously that's the score for the book Negative Space by Ben Roney Yeager. I was thinking about making my own sort of poor attempt at that and then releasing a package of, it would probably be a double vinyl or just, digital download and like a novella or short story. I have no idea how long it's going to be.
Music for No Tomorrow, out now on We're a Foxma. Still got some tapes left on that. You said you're working on possibly 3 separate projects coming up in the near future. You got the second part of Shores of Quiddity.
That's done. It's just waiting for a distributor of some sort.
And then so you're going to be scoring a new movie that's going to be directed by what'd you say his name was?
Nick Verdi.
Nick Verdi. Okay.
Verdi. His stuff is. I'm a big fan, so it's exciting.
All right, and that'll be out sometime next year.
Probably, yeah. Probably like the very end of next year. If not even, it might even be the year after that, like early 2024. God.
And then you might even be dipping your foot into the world of writing, possibly a new novella, short story, something like that.
Unless I'm just like a total shit writer.
So where can everybody follow you to like keep updates? I know you're on Instagram, and that's at burial_grid.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And then Twitter's like my home base.
Twitter's home base, and that's just at burial grid, no dashes or anything. You also said you're recently getting into TikTok.
Yeah, so TikTok, I'm specifically going to be doing daily like synth patch demo videos, like 20-second little demo videos. That's about it. And I'm also going to be boning up on my video capabilities and having more of a YouTube presence. Right now, it's minimal at best. There's really not much of anything on there. But yeah, I have some stuff in the tank. By tank, I mean pipe. Stuff in the pipe. Stuff coming down the pipe.
Down the pipe. It's in the tank, coming down the pipe. Just got to get the pressure going.
Exactly.
However this analogy is supposed to work, right?
Yeah, but I think starting next week, yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot of video work. Well,
Adam, it was really great talking to you. Glad to hear about all the upcoming stuff you got. Of course, hearing about your inspiration behind music for No Tomorrow. We're looking forward to hearing more from you. So great talking to you, and we'll catch you later.
No, this ruled. Thank you so much. This was great.
No problem. Talk to you later.
All right, see ya.